Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. This is episode 24 in the hashtag 2 years ago today CW series dealing with the phone data review. From tomorrow onwards, July 25th, the entire series moves to Patreon, accessible on the $1 tier. Around about 66 of you have moved over to Patreon since I announced the decision to do that about a week ago. Thank you all for doing so. Those who haven't, this is the last episode in the series. I might put up a little teaser for tomorrow where Kessinger talks about I miss your face, and she starts coming a little bit more to the fore in the timeline from this point onwards. Before we get started with today's episode, I just want to talk quickly about why this whole phone data review is necessary to do in the first place. Some people I haven't really been asked the question that much directly, but I've seen some other people talking amongst themselves saying, I don't even know why he's doing it. I don't even know why you would want to. We know what happened, right? And this is my response to that. There are actually at least two different narratives dealing with the Chris Watts case. There's what I call the authentic narrative, and then there's another narrative which is a lot more sort of colorful and sort of zesty, and it is actually, one could even say it's the mainstream narrative, except that it, first of all, doesn't make sense. It doesn't really correspond to a couple of things. And then the other aspect is what has been cottoned onto that narrative is that Chris Watts had accessories. So I don't think a narrative actually exists in the popular imagination for what actually happened during this crime. And that is why I think the test of the Chris Watts case is, are you able to be given, I'm talking about you as an individual and we as a society, are you able to be given a set of information, and are you able to then discern from that reality? And this is what I mean. In the Chris Watts case, uniquely, we have a huge archive of discovery, of body cam footage, of news footage, of news coverage, now of books as well, of documentaries, and also a massive and unusually massive archive of social media from Shanann Watts. Her Thrive videos, the photos from inside the home, effectively inside the crime scene. And so with all of this information, the challenge is to say, do you know what happened? And I'm sort of disappointed to have to say, I don't think most people do. I think in spite of all this information that we have, most people don't know what happened. And to deal with those folks who sort of very confidently declare that it's pretty obvious what did happen, I agree that it's obvious that Chris Watts murdered his family. That part's obvious. I agree with that. What's less obvious is who was Chris Watts really? Also, who was Shanann really? And that question has really been put on the back burner. To some extent, it's only being answered a little bit now. And anyway, so I want to address that question in another way, is to compare, and you're going to laugh, but to compare the Chris Watts case to the coronavirus. And I would suggest that the same people who believe in conspiracy theories around the Chris Watts case believe in conspiracy theories around the coronavirus. It doesn't exist. It was made in a lab in China. It's not as bad as people say. It doesn't affect me, blah, 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 and all of that. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's the majority of people, just as the majority of people involved in the Watts case basically subscribe to the mainstream version, and also this thing about co-conspirators. And what that shows is how weak and poor and defective most people's perception of reality actually is. And someone was saying that in Mexico, the reason why infections are so high there is because the Mexicans just don't have confidence in their government. That they're used to being misled, they're used to being bullshitted. And so when something legitimate comes along, they are very quick to dismiss and say, this is just another scam from government. And that is why it is so important for individuals to be able to look at something with intelligence, with discernment, and know what the difference between what is authentic and what isn't. And of course, the key to telling the difference between what's real and what isn't is being an authentic person yourself. If you're not a real person, if you're a pretend person, if you're a bullshitter, then you're going to get lost in the bullshit yourself. It starts with you. If you're an authentic person and you know how to be a real person in the real world, then you may have a chance at seeing reality in the real world. And so that is what we're talking about when we talk about why we go through this phone data review 2 years later and we say, how much do we actually know? And the other people who also say, we will never know what happened. We will never know what really happened. And if I believed that, I wouldn't have written a single book, never mind around about 12 books in the What series. I've written quite a few other series as well. If I believe that you'll never know what really happened, I wouldn't be a true crime author. I wouldn't have an interest in true crime. If you have that opinion that you'll never know what really happened, then you should really pay no attention to court cases. You should pay no attention to true crime documentaries. You should pay no attention to what lawyers say, because that is what happens at a trial. People don't know what happened, and so the purpose of the trial is to try and find out what happened, to talk about what happened, to figure out what happened by inference. And if there's enough information to confirm what likely happened, then that is made part of the official record, and that is what we call justice, the pursuit of justice. So when you say almost with a pat on your own back, almost with a sense of satisfaction, almost with a sense of glee, we'll never know what actually happened. You actually are saying, what is the point in trying to find justice? And woe betide you when it happens to you. When something happens and you need to find justice in your life and someone says, well, we'll never really know what happened here. You can know. We live in an information age where there are CCTV cameras everywhere. People put their lives on social media. There are body cam footage from the investigators. There's a lot of information, and it adds up to knowing more than we've ever known before. And ironically, weirdly, disappointingly, now that we can know more than we've ever known before, it seems like most people know less. Most people, because their attention spans are so short, are easily caught up in spin and sensationalized data and bullshit and tabloid conspiracy stuff. If it titillates you and excites you and you want to believe it, then you believe it. What's the difference between that and reality? Mark my words, the coronavirus is a test, not of you, not of your community, not of your city, not of your state, not of your nation. It's a test of the human race right now to respond to and adapt to reality, right? If you pass that test, you live and you thrive and you survive. If you fail that test and you say, no, I don't actually think anything's happening here, I'm going to not do anything, I want to carry on with my life as normal, I'm not going to adapt to this, I'm not going to change anything, it's not real, well, then that is going to be your reality. Not adapting, not changing, not doing anything different. And what you resist persists. And so that is why I say The Watts case is an analogy for how we study information, we study people, and we say, we have all of this information, how close can we get to putting it all together, figuring out what really happened? And the 9-part Two-Face series and the Silver Fox trilogy are all about kind of saying, part of it is saying, look how much we knew before it actually happened. And another part of it is saying, to some extent, we had to change what we thought we knew. One thing that I believed that was a mistake was I thought Chris Watts was very, very opposed to Shanann participating in Thrive, in MLM. I thought he knew that it wasn't working, or he knew that in terms of financially, he knew that it wasn't going to save them from bankruptcy. But that doesn't appear to be the case. It seems like he actually supported it and didn't see anything wrong with it, and didn't see how that played at all into their finances. He didn't seem to know exactly why their finances weren't working. Do you? Do you know why the Watts finances weren't working? And that is why we say, we revisit this case 2 years later, and we find out what we know, and we also examine what we perhaps still don't know. Okay, so if you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment. I will be putting up some more analysis on the Madeleine McCann case, perhaps Laurie Vello as well, and I might provide something not related to the phone data review, but something related to the Watts case closer to the time of mid-August. If there are any developments, I might talk about that, but otherwise this will be the last episode in the series on this channel. On July 24th, Nicole Kessinger Googled, "Man I'm having affair with says he will leave his wife." This is a milestone. This was with around about 3 weeks to go, that it seems like Watts has told her, I will leave my wife. I am leaving my wife. Bear in mind, this is after Nutgate. It's almost exactly 2 weeks after Nutgate. Bear in mind, it's a week before he's supposed to go to North Carolina. So it's very possible that he's told her, I've got to go to North Carolina. I've got a previous engagement. I previously made a commitment to go, so I have to go. But don't worry. That doesn't mean you're not first in my life. I am going to leave my wife. Please believe me. So at the same time that he's telling her he's got to leave, he's also telling her, this is permanent. This is, you and I are a big deal. This is going to happen. Does that make sense? At the same time that he's giving her the disappointing news that he's got to go away, he's got to go and see his family. What's that all about? He's saying, to reassure her, he's saying, I'm going to leave my wife for you. But do you think she believes that? Do you think when he's in North Carolina, Kessinger's like, oh, he's with his family now, he's gonna come back to me? Do you think Kessinger believes that? Well, the evidence in the phone data review doesn't seem to show that. She was in contact with him constantly because I think she was afraid that he would go back to his wife. July 24th was roughly halfway into Shanann's 6-week adventure in North Carolina, 3 weeks prior to her murder and 2 weeks after Nutgate. It's clear by this milestone it wasn't only the couple that were arguing, meaning Chris Watts and Shanann. They seemed to be arguing with their respective in-laws as well. More so Shanann arguing with her in-laws than Watts arguing with his. You kind of never get the impression that Watts ever argued with his in-laws. By July 24th, and in fact they seem to love him. The difference between the Ruseks and the Watts, in terms of Chris Watts' parents, The Rusiks seemed to really like Chris Watts, and the Watts family didn't tend to really like Shanann. I'm talking about when everyone was still alive. By July 24th, Kessinger seemed to have confirmation from Watts that the man she said she loved, and she told him she loved him a couple of times as well. That's big. You know, to say you love someone is a milestone. It's taking the relationship to another level. It's saying, I'm committed to you. I want something more permanent. I want something more serious. And this was, I think, a big deal to Watts. I think he did love her. And I've heard people say, yeah, he didn't know how to love. And that has a ring of truth, that Chris Watts didn't know how to love Shanann because he, or even Kessinger, because he was introverted, or he was a narcissist, or because he committed murder, because he's quite a reserved guy, because he has no game, he doesn't know how to love, right? I think that's a dismissive attitude, because Shanann, right through the timeline of her marriage, gave a glowing endorsement of her husband, and some of it you could dismiss as thrive crap, but a lot of it I think was true, especially when you hear what her own parents said about him, that even at his sentencing hearing, I think Sandi said something like, God sent us to you, God sent you to her, or God sent, it was like God sent Chris Watts to Shanann. And then it has that ironic thing because of what happened to her. How could he be the best thing that ever happened to her if he did what he did? And I think you've got to think of it like that. How could Chris Watts be the best thing that ever happened to Shanann if he did what he did? And I think the answer is he was the best thing that ever happened to Shanann until he committed the crime. And that was the problem. His job was to be the best thing that had ever happened to Shanann. His job wasn't for Shanann to be the best thing that ever happened to him, or that they just kind of get along. The one's not like at the other one's service constantly. In any event, on July 24th, with a week to go before Watts is going to North Carolina, Kessinger realizes, okay, this is happening. They've now told one another they love each other, and they plan somehow to make it official. And I guess how they kind of first made it unofficially official was by going to the sand dunes. I think Watts wanted to also make a gesture before he left. I really want to spend time with you. I really want to have a special experience with you. I have to go. I really don't want to go, but I have to go. Let's just enjoy this one last weekend away from everything. And I wouldn't be surprised if in his private heart in jail, in prison, Watts thinks of that weekend as like this magical time that he had, this sort of little piece of heaven that he had on earth, and then everything was taken away. Largely, almost completely because of him, his fault. If you say, well, whose else's fault could it be except Chris Watts? Well, someone did addle his brain. Someone did turn him into somebody else, and also somebody got him to dance, and that is a factor, definitely. In the timeline review, and this is not the only instance, because there's another one as well, Sandi calls Chris Watts, and they have quite long conversations. We don't know what it's about. Or is it Shanann calling from Sandi's phone? We just don't know. But also on the day of the murders, in fact, shortly after, I'm trying to think when it was. It was either the day before the murder or the day after. Sandi spoke to Chris Watts for around about 10 minutes. What was that conversation about? Okay, I've just made sure at 17:07 on Sunday, August 12th, Watts called Sandi Rusick and had a nearly 12-minute conversation. What was that about? What was that conversation about? Why is Watts calling his mother-in-law immediately before all the murders? What is that about? And another thing that's quite interesting is, who is the first person to think that Chris Watts had killed his family? Who is the first person to think that Chris Watts had killed his entire family? Chris Watts, not Shanann. Chris, who thought that he had done something. Do you remember Sandi saying that she thought that Chris Watts had buried his family in oil? Remember that? She was the first person to think that. Why would Sandi think that? Why would Sandi know that? It's quite a jump. It's quite a jump for someone to just go, I think Chris Watts buried his family in oil. She's right. How did she know? And this actually comes from the Discovery page 67, where at 4:38 a.m., and I think this was on the Tuesday, she contacted the police department, and I think she contacted, just make sure, I think she contacted an officer called Goodman, and what she said to him is that Watts was acting weird, and that she thought foul play had happened, and she thought that her son-in-law was involved. And she said that Christopher is telling people he has to go to work, but that doesn't seem right. And this is what she said to Goodman. She felt that he's going to pour oil on the bodies to dispose of them somewhere. That was what Sandi thought right in the beginning. How did she know? I'm not trying to make a conspiracy here. I'm trying to say she knew something about what was really going on in the Watts family, in the marriage. She really knew Shanann really well. She really knew Watts really well. And that is why she thought that. She didn't just guess it out of thin air. She had to have known that Chris Watts is upset about something and angry about something. What was that? Bear in mind, in the week before, she was actually, Chris Watts was living with her in the same house. She was with Chris Watts constantly in the same way that Shanann was. So she saw him. And next thing, her daughter disappears and their children disappear. Okay, so we're about 23 minutes in. We're now going to deal directly with the phone data review, just bullet point by bullet point, right? It starts off July 24th at 05:54. Watts called Shanann and held a 5-minute conversation. Once again, this is a little bit later than usual. It's usually around about 5:20, 5:30. So this is around about half an hour later. We don't know whether he called her from the Platteville hub, but he calls her. Also, that's somewhat unusual that he calls her, and he has a 5-minute conversation with her. She usually calls him, and usually calls him earlier. Then at 08:12, probably at work, and this is about 2 hours, 50 minutes later, Watts transfers a nude image of Kessinger into his secret calculator application. Now, bear in mind, he did the same thing the day before. Except I think that was a semi-nude image. When the phone data reviewer refers to a nude image, I want you to try and just imagine that for a second. That's another thing that is completely missing from the phone data review, and I'm not saying we need to see it. Watts also sent photos, or one photo, I'm not sure how many he sent, but Kessinger said that he also sent photos of his genitals, I think, to her. And what I'm trying to get at by referencing this is to say, in the same way it's not real to you when you don't see dead bodies. The gravity of what has happened, it doesn't really compute. You see all these pictures of Shanann smiling and alive, but you never actually see them dead. It doesn't quite compute. You know about it intellectually, but it's hard to actually form a deeper realization. In the same way, you can kind of imagine what's having a relationship with someone, and you maybe imagine this and that, but when you actually see the person naked, you realize there's just that kind of, how can I put it, that animalistic aspect to it, that raw animalistic side to it, that you may have thought, oh yes, maybe they had an affair, oh yes, maybe they had sex. No, they actually took off their clothes, and maybe, who knows how attractive each one was without clothes on. Who knows why it was just so addictive, and why sex was so amazing. Who knows why it was. But maybe if you saw the image, you would know. All I'm saying is it gives that sense of reality, and that's kind of what I've been talking about in this episode is, do you know what's real? Do you know it's real for another person? And this case is just an example, an experiment in testing that ability. You know, if you're in love with someone else or you like someone else, part of what you've got to ask yourself is, are your own feelings real? Also, this other person, are they going to like me? Can I be myself, or must I pretend to be someone else? Is this person that I like pretending to be someone else? It's all got to do with this thing of, where do you fit in the world, and where should you fit in? How does the world see you? How do you want the world to see you? Or is the world seeing the real you? What's also interesting is, on the same day that this nude image of Kessinger is circling around, or that is floating around between their phones, Kessinger finds out that the man that she's having an affair with plans to spend the rest of his life with him. And that's actually the very next entry. And although I don't think you should see it directly related to one another, in other words, she sends him a nude photo of himself and the next thing he wants to marry her, I don't think it's that direct. I think there's the broader thing that is going on. He's not happily married, he's not financially where he wants to be, things are getting worse if he stays in the situation he's in, but also the sexual aspect is really, really enjoyable, and it's also bringing other parts of him alive. You know, it's making him think about who he really is and who he wants to be, and it's nice to be listened to. It's nice someone listening to his opinion and laughing with him, and it's nice, he's just enjoying it. And then he does feel, well, I really want to be with you from now on. I want to be with you, I don't want to be with somebody else. And so around about 5 hours later, Kessinger searches Google for man I'm having an affair with says he will leave his wife. So one wonders, did he say this to her over lunch? Did he text her after receiving this image? But she must have realized it that day. And when else could he have told her this than at work? When else could he have spoken about this other than for her to say? It's also possible he woke up in her bed that morning, as he did every morning in July, and she said, you know, I love you, but I'm worried about you going to see your family. And then he said, don't worry about that, I'm going to leave my wife, you know, we are going to get divorced. Then at 15:49, Shanann called Watts and held a nearly 10-minute conversation. So you have this juxtaposition between, it's getting more and more intense with Watts and Kessinger, but at the same time Shanann's pregnant, And things are also getting more and more intense with Watts. That is why this thing escalates. And Watts wants to go with the flow. He doesn't want to confront it. He wants to sort of let it sort itself out. And eventually he realizes, I'm going to have to fix this. And by the time he does, it's gotten so out of control that what he does seems really disproportionate. I mean, why did you have to kill anyone? At 16:06, so around about 15 minutes after Shanann called him, Sandi called Watts 12 different times. 12 different times. And they had a roughly 30-minute conversation. Now, I would love to know what happened during that conversation. Do you think we're ever going to find out? I don't. I don't think certain people are going to put up their hand and say, I'd like to talk about what happened there. I think what they would rather say is, I'd rather not talk about what happened there. But that is certainly an aspect in the timeline that draws attention to itself. That's a lot. Between 1606 and 1645 are 12 different calls. It's not Watts calling Sandi, it's Sandi calling him. What's that about? And just before that, Shanann had called Watts. What's that about? What were those calls about? Again, bear in mind, on this day, it's quite ironic what is happening. On this day, Kessinger kind of gets the message, I'm going to leave my wife. It's almost as if Shanann and her mother know that, or know something's going on, or feel something's going on, or intuitively or subconsciously sense that something's going on with Watts. What is going on with you? At 17:30, which is about 45 minutes after Sandi sort of made the series of calls, Shanann asked Watts if he was alive. So this is what happens. Bear in mind, Watts is coming back from work, and then he speaks to Shanann briefly, and then there's this long thing with Sandi, and then at 5:30 Shanann calls him and asks if he's alive, and Watts says, tire light came on when I was leaving King Soopers last night, got the tires aired back up, spent a lot of time looking for anything in it, nothing at all. So this is kind of about where was he last night. They couldn't find him. You know, what was going on last night? And obviously what was going on last night was he ate out with Kessinger. He wasn't available. He was spending time with Kessinger. And they've kind of caught him out. And things are going so well with Kessinger that he's already committed that he's going to leave his family. Now, his family want to know what's going on with him. Do you think he's going to tell them? What he tells them is a tire light came on, and so I had mechanical problems. Shanann responded, you could have answered or texted back, thought something happened, but you don't care about others' feelings, or think you're with another girl, or worse, no consideration of others. So again, Shanann's actually on point here. I think this is the first time she says, are you with another girl? He is. And if Shanann could only just freeze right here and say, something is up, we need to address it. We need to speak for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours and make sure we know what's going on here. But they never do. They always have fairly brief conversations. when she pushes him, he withdraws, but then she sort of allows him to withdraw. It's a difficult situation because she can't tell what is Nutgate, what is Chris Watts being reserved, and she's also pregnant and she's somewhere else. Wouldn't the answer been at this point to go home? Why, she's done her Thrive thing in North Carolina. Why not go home at this point? Go home to Colorado. What if she did? What if she had gone home? It would have nipped the affair in the bud, and he would never have gone to the sand dunes. They could have spoken properly about what was going on. There was no need for sulking. Who knows what would have happened? When she says no consideration of others, well, his consideration is now for Kessinger. You don't care about others' feelings. Now, I don't think Shanann would be saying any of this if she was used to Chris Watts being like a narcissist or always thinking about herself. Constantly in her social media, she talks about what a wonderful husband he is. You do so much for the kids, right? It's not just her saying it, it's also her parents saying it. And people then say, no, he doesn't know how to love. He seems like a really giving person. And the thing that I think a lot of people miss is, have you ever loved somebody and you give and you give and you give and you give, and then they do something, and then you actually feel kind of resentment. You feel like, geez, I don't deserve this. I've done so much for you. You don't think about that from the beginning. You don't think I'm doing this to get something back. But you give and you give and you love and you do whatever. And then it sort of steals up on you that it's totally unfair, the amount that you give and then what you kind of get in return. I mean, right now I'm in a little bit of a situation like that myself, where I'm not going to talk too much about it, but there's something that I was going to do involving another person at quite a substantial cost to myself. And this other person, I'd asked something to happen, and a small little thing, a very small little thing. And then that, I won't say it didn't happen, but it sort of, basically didn't happen. And that thing is small and it doesn't really cost anything. And then you say, wow, I had no qualms about spending all that money and going to a lot of effort because of what I want to do. And for this person, it's quite difficult to do this small thing. And then suddenly you think, wow, am I being realistic about this? Does this make sense? So with Chris Watts, if he'd given so much to his family, I'm talking about if he'd cared for them, spent money on them, spent time with them, loved them, and then only for it to sort of feel like it all kind of, what do they call it? It all exploded in his face. Wouldn't anybody feel resentment if that had to happen? If you treat someone well and you give and you give and you give, and at the smallest thing it all blows up, aren't you going to feel like, okay, well, I'm done. I can't keep giving so much of myself. Now, I know that sounds like a defense of Chris Watts. I'm talking about it besides the crime, besides the murders. Anyone in a situation of a marriage that gives and understands and loves, and I'll do the laundry and I'll do that, and the other person just seems to be taking or giving orders or whatever. Don't you reach a point where you're like, I can't do this anymore? When is it ever enough? When do I get listened to? When do I get appreciated? Do you get what I'm saying? And that's also why people who say, I don't think Shanann had lupus, I think she did. Because I think the lupus explains a lot about some of the phantom anxiety Shanann had, which you could say is paranoia. and some of the real justifiable anxiety she had, and also I think why the children were sickly. Shanann wasn't supposed to have children. She did have children. Because she did have children, they were sickly. They were unusually sickly because Shanann had lupus. And that led to medical bills. And again, Chris Watts is the sort of outsider here. He's healthy and everybody else is sick. And then he meets Kessinger, who is a healthy person herself, who's just someone that's like him. And he can't believe that someone like her exists. She never gets sick. She doesn't spend a lot. She listens to what he says. She's interested in who he is. She's not always asking him to do something. She wants to spend time with him. Around about 2 minutes, and this is a strange thing in the phone data review. It's out of order. I don't know if it's a mistake. I don't know if it's actually supposed to be 1738 or what, but it's out of order. This is Discovery page 2092. Watts searched Google for Victoria's Secret at the Orchard Town Centre, and that suggests he was going to go and buy lingerie for Kessinger. You can clearly see a heck of a lot is happening on Tuesday the 24th. There's this sense of permanence where he's deciding to make it official that he's gonna, that he loves Kessinger, that he wants to be with her, that he's not going to be with his family. There's Kessinger Googling something that he said. Man I'm having an affair with says he will leave his wife. That's what he said. What said, I will leave my wife? When do you think he said it? He either said it at lunchtime or he said it that morning in bed, or maybe said it the night before. But it's stuck in Kessinger's mind. She's wondering what is going to happen. How long is this going to go on? How does this tend to work? When a guy says when a guy is having an affair and he says he'll leave his wife, what should happen? How should a mistress handle it? And that's something to go and look at. Google, man I'm having an affair with says he will leave his wife. What's the advice of other mistresses? You've got him, make sure you don't lose him now. You know, you've got him to make sure you don't lose him. And then there's this thing where he's now going to go to his wife in North Carolina. What if something happens there? What if he changes his mind? And so the stakes are going up and up and up. If she wants to keep him, she may need to up the sexual ante in this final week. And isn't that what's happening? Isn't that why Watts Google's Victoria's Secret? He's going to get her some lingerie. And although you're not going to necessarily hear it in the phone data review because it happens tomorrow, she sends kind of a flirty phone message, one of the few artifacts from Kessinger left in the phone data review, where she calls him and says in kind of a cutesy voice, I miss your face. She's trying to be endearing. She probably feels sincere. She probably feels like, wow, what a kind guy. Maybe this could work. You know, maybe this is my Prince Charming. As horrible as that sounds, at this point she might be thinking, Chris Watts is such a nice person. You know, my one friend is getting married. Maybe this is my chance. Maybe this is the guy for me. You know, his family don't care about him. They've gone somewhere else. And, you know, I've gotten to know him and he's such a nice person. He's so considerate. He's there for me. At 18:02, half an hour later, Shanann tells Watts, I realized during this trip, meaning to North Carolina, what's missing in our relationship. It's only one-way emotions and feelings. I can't come back like this. I need you to meet me halfway. You don't consider others at all, nor think about others' feelings. So Shanann has kind of reached a point. She's realized that something serious is going on, and she's right. Something is going on. And she is like I said earlier, now would be a good time for her to come back. And she's saying, I'm not going to come back like this. It's almost like she's punishing him. She's saying, your introversion is getting out of hand. You just think of yourself or something like that. I can't come back like this, so I'm going to stay here. And if you can't meet me halfway, if you can't consider someone else, then I'm not going to come back, or something like that. And that, of course, suits him perfectly. He doesn't want her to come back. He's trying to give her as little of his emotions that she will accept, right? Now, I've stressed previously that Watts is going to do whatever he can to get Shanann off his back. He's going to try and say what he can to minimize her arguing, just to prevent a drama, to prevent an argument, right? And so he says exactly what he thinks she wants to hear. The phone data review refers to Watts' reply that he was sorry and he loves her. I'm sorry that you think I don't have feelings for you. I'm sorry that you think I don't consider others. I'm sorry that you think I don't think about others' feelings. I love you. He apologizes. He tries to soothe her, not because he really is sorry, and not because he loves her. He doesn't love her. He's just realized he loves someone else. And this is again where he realizes to escape, to get out of it, he needs to cover his tracks with lies. He needs to say what she wants to hear so that he can continue what he's doing. And it's worked for him in the past. Shanann responds, I try to give you space, but while you are working and living the bachelor life, I'm carrying our third and fighting with our 2 kids daily and trying to work and make money. So here is a genuine message at last from Shanann. It's not got a lot of barbs and ugly language in it. She's just laying it down. She's saying, while you are having quite a simple life and not a care in the world, she's got no idea what he's actually doing, but she says, while you're living the bachelor life, I'm carrying our 3rd child, and I'm arguing with our children every day, and I'm trying to work and make money. This reference to making money isn't just, I'm trying to make money. It is a desperate thing of, I'm trying to make money. I'm trying to survive. I'm trying to help us survive. And she's saying, within the context of that, how hard is it to text, I love you and miss you? She's right. How hard is it? It's not hard for him. It's just that he doesn't want to do it. He's texting, I love you and I miss you to Kessinger. And she is also texting the same thing to him. That part of the whole thing is just completely missing. He doesn't realize that he should miss Shanann, and that he should say these things, because that whole dimension is being lived out with Kessinger at that time. Now listen to this. This is a strong moment from Shanann which could have saved her life. She says, if you don't mean it, meaning I love you, if you don't mean it, then I get it, but we need to talk. I kept looking at my phone all night and no response from you. Like, seriously, ! We didn't just start dating yesterday. We've been together 8 years and have 2.5 kids together. Quite a while later, at 8:10, Shanann called Watson, had a 17-minute conversation, and that's the end of the timeline. So we don't know how Watts responded to that message, but what I can guarantee you was likely happening was that Watts wants to go to Kessinger on Tuesday night. Bear in mind what I said earlier. This is his last week that he can spend with Kessinger before the honeymoon with her is really over. And it's getting more and more exciting. They love one another. The sex is better than ever. And, it's just the stakes are going up. And he's perhaps bought lingerie for her at around about the time that Shanann's sending this. He's going to Orchard Centre on the way to Kessinger's place. When he gets there, he gives it to her. She puts it on, and isn't that what they're doing that night? Celebrating the fact that they love one another and that he's going to leave his wife, and it's happening. The affair isn't just an affair; it is happening. In terms of it's some kind of permanent relationship that he is committing to, and she seems to want. And so when Shanann at last sends this important message, it doesn't seem like Watts is there when it arrives. I mean, it seems like maybe he's making love to his mistress when the message is sent. And just think about that. Think about the words Shanann sends, and imagine what Watts is doing at the time. You're living the bachelor life. I'm carrying our third and fighting with our 2 kids daily and trying to work and make money. It's not hard texting, love you and miss you. If you don't mean it, then I get it, but we need to talk. I kept looking at my phone at night and no response from you. Like, seriously, we didn't just start dating yesterday. We've been together 8 years and 2.5 kids together. I wouldn't be surprised if Watts looks at that and says, and just feels even more, I just don't want this. I don't want to fight with the kids daily. I don't want to worry about this 3rd child. I don't want to text I love you to Shanann or I miss you, because I don't. I don't want to even deal with the fact that I don't mean it. I can't deal with it. I don't want to deal with it. I want to be with Kessinger. I don't want to be with my family. They're somewhere else anyway. I want to be with Kessinger. That's what I'm interested in. I don't want to be part of this argument. I don't want to argue with her. I want to enjoy my fairy tale. When Shanann calls him, I think he's obliged to answer this time, and maybe he's at Kessinger, and they have a 17-minute conversation. It would be amazing to know what was said in that conversation. More than likely, Shanann said a lot. Chris Watts didn't say much and said, I'm sorry, probably saying the same thing he's been saying all along. I'm sorry, I have been working out. I've just been under a lot of pressure from work. I'm under a lot of pressure from work. Not, I'm under, someone at work is on top of me, and that's the pressure I'm feeling right now. We can also see how smoothly and easily Watts lies to Shanann about where he was and what he was doing. Cheating in general, but conducting an affair in particular, requires planning, foresight, and knowing how to plausibly account for downtime. All of this was practice for the dark acts that were brewing in the back of his mind. We can see that July 24th was also the first time Shanann truly saw beyond Nutgate and realized something was very wrong with him and their marriage. She even mentions it to him having another girl, which I mentioned earlier, which Watts craftily let slide. But this was late, too late. It was already more than 3 weeks into his sexually active affair, and he'd already committed himself to his mistress, and apparently she to him. Shanann's suspicions at this point were a serious threat to his future now, and his future plans. What could he do about that? In total, Shanann and her mother spoke to Watts for over an hour on July 24th. A new record. And that is it. That concludes the phone data review for July 24th, 2018, 2 years ago today. The next episode in the series is episode 25. That'll be on Patreon, and I'll see you guys there. Thank you for listening.